Some men rule through fear, others through money. Dominic Vale wielded both like weapons, until the day a woman walked back into his world carrying a secret that would burn his empire to ash. 3 years ago, he'd offered her money to erase a problem. She'd refused and vanished. Now she stood across a crowded ballroom, and in the hospital room beyond, 2 pairs of eyes would shatter everything he thought he knew about power. This is a story about the choice that broke a king and the children who became his reckoning. If you're drawn to stories of redemption carved from ruin, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse like it was trying to break through, trying to get inside where it was warm and dry and insulated from the ugliness of the world below. Dominic Vale stood with his back to the storm, hands in his pockets, perfectly still. He'd learned long ago that stillness was a kind of power. Movement suggested nervousness, hesitation, weakness. He didn't do weakness. Behind him, the city glittered, 40 floors of separation between him and the people who scrambled through their small lives down there in the rain. Manhattan spread out like a kingdom he'd conquered one bloody piece at a time, and tonight, like every night, it belonged to him. "Mr. Vale?" The voice was soft, uncertain. It came from the woman standing near the door, her coat still dripping onto the imported marble. She hadn't taken it off. Maybe she knew she wouldn't be staying long. Dominic didn't turn around. "You said it was urgent." His voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of quiet that made people nervous. "I'm here. Talk." Elena Cruz twisted her hands together, and even without seeing her face, he could feel her fear. Good. Fear meant control. Fear meant she understood the situation. "I needed to tell you in person," she said. "I couldn't. On the phone, I couldn't. Elena." He did turn then. Just his head, just enough to pin her with those steel-gray eyes that had made grown men stammer. "I don't have time for whatever emotional spiral you're working through. Get to the point." She flinched. He watched her do it, watched the way his words landed like a slap, and felt nothing. 3 months. That's how long their arrangement had lasted. 3 months of convenience, her warmth in his bed, her laughter in his empty penthouse, her body as an escape from the weight of running an empire built on blood and silence. She'd been different from the others, genuine, real. She'd worked as a translator at one of his legitimate front companies, spoke 4 languages, had dreams of something bigger. He'd liked that about her, for a while. But genuine and real had no place in Dominic Vale's world. That lesson was about to become very clear. "I'm pregnant." 2 words. They hung in the air between them like smoke. Dominic went very still again. Not the powerful kind of stillness this time. This was the stillness of a predator calculating its next move. His mind, always 3 steps ahead, began running scenarios. Problems. Solutions. Variables to eliminate. "How long have you known?" His voice hadn't changed. Still quiet, still controlled. 6 weeks. Elena's hands moved to her stomach, a protective gesture she probably didn't even realize she was making. "I took 3 tests. I went to a doctor. It's real, Dominic. I'm going to have a baby." "No," he said simply. "You're not." The word landed like a stone in still water. Elena's breath caught. "What?" Dominic turned fully now, sliding his hands from his pockets, buttoning his suit jacket with movements that were almost casual. "Business." That's what this was. A business problem requiring a business solution. "You're not having a baby, Elena. We're going to fix this." "Fix this?" Her voice cracked. "This is a child. Our child. It's a cluster of cells that's going to become a very expensive problem if we don't handle it now." He moved to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook. The scratch of the pen was loud in the sudden silence. "I'm writing you a check for $200,000. That should more than cover the procedure and whatever time you need to take off work. My assistant will arrange the appointment at a private clinic. Discreet, professional. You'll be back to normal in a week." He tore the check free and held it out. Elena stared at it like it was a snake. "I don't want your money." "Everyone wants money, Elena. Don't be naive." He set the check on the desk between them. This is generous, more than generous. Take it. I want... Her voice broke. She tried again. I want you to want this. Want us. Something flickered across Dominic's face then. Not quite emotion, more like the memory of what emotion used to feel like before he'd learned to kill it. I don't want a child, he said, and his voice was so empty it hurt to hear. I don't want the complication. I don't want the liability. And I certainly don't want to be tied to someone who clearly doesn't understand how this works. How this works? Elena's shock was giving way to something sharper. Anger, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. You told me. You said when you held me that I was different, that I made you feel... I say a lot of things. Dominic cut her off with surgical precision. Usually whatever will get me what I want in the moment. You were good company, Elena. Pleasant distraction. But if you thought this was something more, that's your mistake, not mine. The cruelty was deliberate, precise. He'd learned long ago that the fastest way to end something was to make it hurt too much to hold on to. Elena's face went white, then red, then white again. You're a monster, she whispered. Yes. He didn't deny it, didn't defend, just stood there in his perfectly tailored suit, in his perfect penthouse, and confirmed what she was only now beginning to understand. Which is exactly why you should take the money and make this go away. A child with me as a father? That's not the gift you think it is. I won't. Her hands were shaking now. Her whole body was shaking. I won't kill my baby because you're too much of a coward to... Then you're choosing a very difficult path. Dominic's voice dropped to something colder than she'd ever heard from him. I won't be part of it. I won't acknowledge it. I won't support it. You walk out that door pregnant, you walk out alone. Permanently. Then I'll do it alone. With what money? Your translator's salary? You'll be showing in another month. How long before you lose that job? Where will you live when you can't make rent? How will you afford doctors, hospitals, all the things a baby needs? He let each question land like a blow. You think you're being noble. You're being stupid. Elena grabbed the check from the desk. For one moment, Dominic thought he'd won, thought she'd seen reason. Then she tore it in half. Quarters. Confetti. She let the pieces fall like snow between them. Keep your blood money, she said, and her voice had gone quiet now, too. A different kind of quiet, the kind that came after something fundamental had broken. I'll manage. Elena, don't. She held up a hand. Don't say my name like you ever cared what it meant. She turned toward the door. If you leave, Dominic said, and there was something in his voice now that hadn't been there before, something almost like panic. I won't come after you. I won't change my mind. This is your last chance to be smart about this. Elena stopped. Her hand was on the doorknob. You told me once, she said without turning around, that your father taught you love was weakness, that caring about anyone was just giving them a weapon to use against you. Her voice caught. I thought I could prove him wrong. I thought if I loved you enough, you'd remember how to be human. She opened the door. I was wrong. He didn't teach you that love was weakness. She looked back one last time, and her eyes were wet, but her voice was steel. He taught you that you weren't worth loving, and you believed him. The door closed. The penthouse went silent, except for the rain. Dominic stood there for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window, back to his city, back to the empire that had cost him everything and given him nothing that mattered. He told himself he'd made the right choice. He told himself the tightness in his chest was just stress. He told himself he'd forget about Elena Cruz in a week. He was wrong about all of it. 6 weeks later, Marcus Chen sat across from Dominic's desk with a file folder in his lap and an expression that suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else. As Dominic's head of security and one of the few people alive who could claim anything resembling friendship with the man, Marcus had delivered plenty of bad news over the years. This felt different. Just tell me, Dominic said without looking up from his laptop. Elena Cruz has disappeared. Now Dominic looked up. Disappeared how? How do you think? She quit her job 2 weeks ago, cleaned out her apartment, no forwarding address. Her phone's disconnected. Her bank accounts are closed. Marcus opened the folder. She's gone, Dom. Really gone. People don't just vanish. People with your resources don't vanish. People like Elena? They vanish all the time. Marcus slid a photograph across the desk. Security footage from Elena's building. A timestamp from 8 days ago. She was carrying a suitcase, wearing a coat too big for her small frame, and she wasn't looking back. Dominic stared at the image. "You told me to keep tabs on her," Marcus said quietly. "Make sure she was managing." "I tried. She made sure I couldn't." "Try harder." "Dom," I said, "try harder." Dominic's voice had edges now, sharp ones. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find her." Marcus studied his friend's face. Why? The question hung there. Why did it matter? Dominic had made his position clear, had drawn his lines, had chosen his path. Elena Cruz was a problem he'd solved by refusing to engage with it. So why did the thought of her out there somewhere, alone, carrying... "She doesn't have any family," Dominic said, which wasn't an answer. "No support system. If something happens, you made it very clear you didn't care what happened." "Marcus, I'm just saying what you said. To her face. In this room." Marcus leaned forward. "Look, you're my friend. Have been since we were kids scrapping in that group home. So I'm going to say this once, and you're going to actually hear me. You can't have it both ways. You either care or you don't. You either want her safe or you want her gone. Pick one." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Find her. That's not a request." Marcus sighed, closed the folder, stood up. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, she deserved better than what you gave her." "I know." The admission came out so quiet Marcus almost missed it. "Then why?" "Because better than me isn't a high bar." Dominic turned back to his laptop, his face carefully blank. "And because I've never been good at giving people what they deserve, just what they can survive." Marcus left without another word. Dominic stared at the photograph Elena had left behind. Security footage couldn't capture the things he remembered, the way she laughed, the sound of her voice in the dark, the genuine warmth she'd brought into his cold, careful world. He'd convinced himself he was protecting her by pushing her away. Now she was gone, and protection felt a lot like loss. His phone buzzed. Business. Always business. The world didn't stop moving just because Dominic Vale had made one more mistake in a lifetime full of them. He answered the call, made the decision, moved the pieces on the board, and told himself that the hollow feeling in his chest was just the price of power. 3 months later. The town had no name that mattered. It was one of those places people ended up when they were running from something, the kind of coastal nowhere with more fishing boats than ambition. Gray water, gray sky, gray future, perfect for disappearing. Elena Cruz, though she wasn't using that name anymore, lived in a room above a bait shop that smelled like dead fish and desperation. The room was small, cold. The heater only worked when it wanted to, but it was hers, paid for with cash from the job she'd managed to find. Cleaning houses, waiting tables at the diner, washing dishes at the seafood place by the docks. 3 jobs. Barely enough to cover rent and food and the slow, terrifying march toward a future she was building one exhausted day at a time. She was 5 months along now. The pregnancy had announced itself with a vengeance. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made every movement feel like swimming through concrete. The doctor at the free clinic had asked careful questions about her support system, her resources, her plan. Elena had lied about all of it. Now, standing in the tiny bathroom she shared with 2 other tenants, she stared at her reflection. Her face had gotten thinner despite the growing curve of her belly, dark circles under her eyes. Hair she couldn't afford to maintain properly pulled back in a messy knot. She looked like she was surviving. She was. Barely. "You're going to be okay," she whispered to her reflection, to the life growing inside her, to the future that terrified her more with each passing day. "We're going to be okay." The words felt like a prayer to a God she wasn't sure was listening. Her phone, a cheap prepaid thing she'd bought with cash, buzzed. A text from the diner. Someone had called in sick. Could she cover the dinner shift? She was already scheduled to clean houses all day. She texted back, "Yes." Because that's what survival looked like. Saying yes until your body gave out, and then saying yes a little bit longer. She pulled on her coat, the one she'd bought secondhand that was 2 sizes too big, because she'd need the room soon, grabbed her keys, locked the door to the room that smelled like fish, and went to work. 5 months later. Winter hit the coast like a fist. Elena was 8 months pregnant and should not have been working. The doctor at the clinic had told her as much, using words like bed rest and high risk that Elena couldn't afford to hear. High risk required insurance. Bed rest required savings. She had neither. So she kept working, kept moving, kept pretending that the tightness in her belly was normal, the exhaustion was manageable, the occasional dizziness was just part of the process. She was cleaning a house on the north end of town when the storm rolled in. It came fast, one of those late-season systems that meteorologists loved and normal people feared. The wind picked up, the temperature dropped. By the time Elena finished scrubbing the bathroom and made it to her car, the first snowflakes were falling. By the time she was halfway home, the world had gone white. The car, a 15-year-old sedan she'd bought for $800, started making a sound that suggested it shared her feelings about the weather. The heater worked sporadically. The windshield wipers were losing their battle against the snow. Elena gripped the steering wheel and tried to see the road. The pain hit like lightning, sharp, sudden, stealing her breath. She gasped, nearly swerved, managed to keep the car straight through sheer force of will. Another pain, stronger. No, she said it out loud, firm, like she could negotiate with biology. No, not yet. Not now. The baby, or babies she still didn't know, couldn't afford the ultrasound that would tell her, had other plans. By the time she pulled up to the bait shop, the contractions were 5 minutes apart, and the storm had killed the power for 6 blocks. Elena sat in the dark car, in the howling wind, and tried not to panic. Her phone had no signal. The storm had taken down the cell tower. She couldn't drive herself to the hospital. It was 40 minutes away in good weather, and this was decidedly not good weather. Another contraction. Stronger. Closer. She needed help. Elena forced herself out of the car and into the storm. The snow was already ankle-deep and falling harder. She made it to the stairs leading up to her room, climbed them one agonizing step at a time, and nearly collapsed at the top. The door to the room next to hers opened. Margaret Hale was 73 years old, had lived in this building for 30 years, and had been a midwife before arthritis and age had forced her to retire. She took one look at Elena's face and knew. How far apart? Margaret's voice was calm, certain, the kind of calm that came from having delivered hundreds of babies over a 40-year career. 5 minutes, maybe less. Come on then. Margaret took Elena's arm with surprising strength. Let's get you inside before this storm kills us both. They made it into Elena's room just as the contractions hit 3 minutes apart. Margaret moved with practiced efficiency, lighting candles, boiling water on the camping stove Elena used because the kitchen was shared and usually disgusting, pulling together supplies from what little they had. I can't pay you, Elena managed between contractions. Did I ask for money? I don't even know if... Another contraction cut off her words. Margaret helped her to the bed, such as it was. First baby? Elena nodded, then shook her head. I don't know. The clinic said they thought maybe twins, but I couldn't afford to confirm. Margaret went very still. Then her professional mask slipped back into place. Well, let's see what we're working with, shall we? The labor lasted 6 hours. In that time, the storm knocked out power for half the town. The snow piled 3 feet high, the temperature dropped to dangerous levels, and in a room that smelled like fish, lit by candles, with only a retired midwife and sheer stubborn will to help her, Elena Cruz gave birth to twins. A boy came first. He was small but healthy, with a strong cry that filled the room. Margaret cleaned him, wrapped him in the cleanest towel they could find, placed him in Elena's shaking arms. Elena looked down at her son and felt something shift in her chest, something fundamental. Like every decision she'd ever made had led to this moment, and somehow, impossibly, it was worth it. One more, Margaret said gently. I can see the head. You need to push again. The girl came 20 minutes later. She was smaller than her brother, weaker. Her cry was softer, more fragile. Margaret worked fast, clearing the baby's airways, stimulating her, trying to get her to breathe properly. The seconds stretched like hours. Then, a stronger cry. Not as loud as her brother's, but enough. She's a fighter, Margaret said, wrapping the tiny girl and placing her beside her brother in Elena's arms. Going to have to be. Elena stared down at her children, her twins, the secret she'd carried alone for 9 months, the future she'd built with her own bleeding hands, and started to cry. Not from pain, not from fear, from relief, from joy, from the overwhelming, terrifying knowledge that she was responsible for these 2 tiny lives now, and there was no going back. They need names, Margaret said softly. Elena looked at her son. Steel-gray eyes stared back at her with an intensity that made her breath catch, his father's eyes. Matteo, she whispered. His name is Matteo. And her daughter, so small, so fragile, with dark eyes that looked at the world with quiet determination. Luna. Her name is Luna. Margaret smiled. Good names. Strong names. The storm raged outside. The candles flickered. In the distance, sirens suggested someone else wasn't as lucky. But in this moment, in this room, Elena held her children and felt something she hadn't felt in 9 months. Hope was 3 years later. Manhattan. Dominic Vale stood in his penthouse and stared at the city that had once felt like a kingdom and now felt like a cage. 3 years since Elena had walked out. 3 years since Marcus had reported back that she'd vanished completely, covered her tracks with the kind of desperate thoroughness that suggested she never wanted to be found. 3 years since Dominic had told himself he was relieved that her disappearance meant one less problem, one less variable. 3 years of lying to himself. The empire had grown. His legitimate businesses had expanded. His underground operations ran with perfect efficiency. He'd married Vanessa Ashford 6 months ago, a merger disguised as a romance, all strategic benefit and zero genuine feeling. She was beautiful, connected, exactly the kind of wife a man in his position should have. She also didn't care about him any more than he cared about her, which made the arrangement perfect. Or it should have. The car's ready. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, dressed in something that probably cost more than most people made in a month. The charity gala tonight was important. Donors, connections, the kind of social performance that kept the legitimate side of his empire running. We're going to be late. I'm aware. Dominic didn't move from the window. Vanessa sighed. Is this about her again? I don't know what you're talking about. You do this every year around this time. Get broody, distant. Marcus told me why. She moved into the room, heels clicking on marble. The translator, the one who got away. Marcus talks too much. Marcus worries about you. Someone should. Vanessa stopped beside him, following his gaze out to the city. You could find her if you really wanted to. You have the resources. She doesn't want to be found. Since when does that stop you? It was a fair question. Dominic Vale built his empire by refusing to accept no as an answer, by pushing until things broke or bent to his will. But with Elena, I told her to leave, he said quietly. I made sure it hurt enough that she wouldn't come back. Finding her now would just be another way of proving I only care about control, not her actual happiness. How noble. Vanessa's tone suggested she found nothing noble about it at all. So instead you marry someone you don't love and pretend you're fine. We have an understanding. We have a transaction. It's different. She turned to face him. I'm not judging. I knew what this was when I signed the contract. But don't mistake a good strategic partnership for actual happiness, Dominic. You're capable of one. Not sure you've ever tried the other. The car was waiting. They went to the gala. Dominic smiled at the right people, said the right things, made the right donations. He was good at performing, had been doing it his whole life. And then, across the ballroom, he saw her. Elena. The world stopped. She was different, thinner, tired-looking, wearing a server's uniform and carrying a tray of champagne glasses. She was working the event. Just another face in the army of invisible people who made these nights possible. But Dominic would have recognized her anywhere. Their eyes met across the crowded room. He saw the moment she registered who he was. Saw the color drain from her face. Saw her hands tighten on the tray hard enough that the glasses shook. He took a step toward her. She ran. The tray clattered onto a table. Champagne splashed. People turned to stare. Elena was already pushing through the crowd, heading for the service exit, moving like her life depended on it. Dominic followed. He caught up with her in the service hallway, empty except for the distant sounds of the gala and the harsh sound of Elena's breathing as she faced him. "Don't." Her voice shook. "Don't come any closer." He stopped, raised his hand slightly. Harmless. Non-threatening. All the things he'd never actually been. "Elena, I go by Anna now. Elena doesn't exist anymore." Her back was against the wall. Nowhere to run. "What do you want?" What did he want? That was the question, wasn't it? The one he'd been asking himself for 3 years without ever finding an answer that didn't make him sound pathetic. "I looked for you," he said. "I know. I made sure you wouldn't find me. Why come back to New York?" "I didn't have a choice." Something flickered across her face. Fear. Real fear. "I needed work. Better work. This city pays better than—" She stopped, regrouped. "It doesn't matter. I'll leave, tomorrow. You won't see me again." "You don't have to leave." "Yes, I do." Her laugh was sharp, broken. "You made it very clear 3 years ago that you wanted nothing to do with me. That hasn't changed. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe?" She pushed off the wall and now she was angry. "Maybe? You called me stupid. You reduced our baby to a problem that needed erasing. You made me feel like the biggest mistake I ever made was loving you." "You were right." The words came out raw, unplanned. "What you said before you left, about my father, about me believing I wasn't worth loving. You were right." Elena stared at him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've had 3 years to think about it. 3 years to realize that the only time I've ever felt anything real was when you were around." He took a breath. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I needed you to know that you weren't the one who was wrong. I was." For a moment, something shifted in her face, something soft. Then it hardened again. "It's too late, Dominic." "I know." "You're married." "I know that too." "Then this conversation is pointless." She moved past him, headed for the exit. "Forget you saw me. I'll forget I saw you. We can both go back to our separate lives." She was almost to the door when Dominic said the words that would change everything. "Was it a boy or a girl?" Elena froze. The silence stretched so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, "Does it matter?" "Yes." She looked back at him, and her eyes were wet. "Why? Why does it suddenly matter now?" Because he'd been lying to himself for 3 years, because the empire felt empty, because he woke up some nights wondering what might have been if he'd been brave enough to choose differently. "Because I'm tired of pretending I made the right choice." Elena's breath caught. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up 3 years later and—" A phone rang. Not Dominic's. Elena's. A cheap prepaid thing she pulled from her pocket with shaking hands. She looked at the screen and her face went white. "I have to go." She answered the call. "Margaret, what's wrong?" Dominic watched her face change, saw terror replace everything else. "I'm on my way. Don't let them out of your sight. Her voice broke. "I'm coming." She ended the call. "What happened?" Dominic asked. "Nothing that concerns you." But her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. "I have to go, right now." "Elena? Anna." She was moving now, fast. "My name is Anna, and you need to forget you saw me." She ran. This time, Dominic didn't follow, but he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marcus, I need you to follow someone, carefully. Don't approach. Just tell me where she goes." Because 3 years ago, he'd let her walk away. He wasn't making that mistake twice, even if it was already too late, even if he deserved exactly the emptiness he'd built for himself, even if the answer to his question, boy or girl, was something he had no right to know anymore. He stood in the empty hallway and felt the weight of every wrong choice he'd ever made, and wondered if redemption was even possible for someone like him, or if some mistakes were too big to ever fix. The taxi couldn't move fast enough through Manhattan traffic. Anna, she had to remember to think of herself as Anna, pressed her forehead against the cold window and tried to keep her breathing steady. Margaret's voice kept replaying in her head, calm but urgent. "There's a man watching the building. Has been for the past hour. Anna, I think you need to come home now. Her children were 3 years old, too young to understand danger, too young to protect themselves, too young to pay for her mistakes. The city blurred past. 20 blocks. 15. 10. Each red light felt like an eternity. She'd left Matteo and Luna with Margaret because the gala paid triple her usual rate, because they needed the money for winter coats and the doctor's visit Luna needed for her persistent cough, because survival required constant calculation of risk versus reward. She'd calculated wrong. The taxi pulled up to the small apartment building in Queens where she'd been living for the past 6 months. It wasn't much. A one-bedroom walk-up in a neighborhood that asked no questions, but it was theirs. Safe. Anonymous. Or it had been. Elena threw cash at the driver and ran. Up the stairs, her heart hammering, down the hallway. Her key was already in her hand when she reached Margaret's door. It opened before she could knock. "They're fine," Margaret said immediately. "They're sleeping, but Anna, that man, where is he?" "Gone. He left about 20 minutes ago, but he was taking pictures of the building, of the door." Margaret's weathered face was tight with worry. "I've lived here 30 years. I know trouble when I see it." Elena pushed past her into the small living room. There, on Margaret's ancient couch, her children slept curled together like puppies. Matteo had his arm around Luna, protective even in sleep. They were wearing the pajamas Elena had found at the thrift store, clean but worn, printed with cartoon characters whose shows they'd never seen because they didn't have a television. They were beautiful. They were hers, and someone had found them. "Did you see what he looked like?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Tall, expensive suit, had that look about him. Professional. Margaret touched her arm. "Anna, who are you running from?" Elena couldn't answer that. Couldn't explain that 3 years ago she'd fled from a man whose power stretched across this city like a shadow, who could find anyone, ruin anyone, destroy anyone who got in his way. Couldn't explain that seeing Dominic Vale tonight had been like watching her worst nightmare step out of the dark. She'd been so careful, changed her name, paid only in cash, avoided cameras, never stayed in one place too long. But she'd made a mistake coming back to New York. She'd let desperation override caution, and now, "I need to get them out of here," Elena said. "At midnight? In the cold? Where will you go?" "I don't know. Anywhere. Just not here." "Anna," Margaret's voice was firm, "listen to me. Running scared in the middle of the night with 2 babies is how people end up hurt. Or worse, think this through." But Elena couldn't think. Could only feel the panic rising in her throat like water. Could only see those steel gray eyes across the ballroom. Could only hear Dominic's voice asking, was it a boy or a girl? Like he had any right to know, like he hadn't thrown her away when she needed him most. She moved to the couch and gently scooped up Luna. The little girl stirred but didn't wake. So light, too light. The cough had been stealing her appetite for weeks. "Mama?" Matteo's eyes opened, gray eyes, his father's eyes. "Are we going home?" "Yes, baby, we're going home. Can we have pancakes tomorrow?" The question broke her heart. Such a small request. Pancakes. Other children asked for toys, trips, adventures. Her son asked for pancakes because they were a rare treat, something they could only afford when she worked enough extra shifts. "Yes," she promised. "Pancakes tomorrow." She gathered him up too, one child on each hip, her back already aching from the weight. Margaret pressed something into her hand, a piece of paper. "My daughter's number. She lives in Boston. If you need somewhere to go, somewhere safe, you call her. Tell her I sent you." Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain the fiction that she could handle this alone, but the paper was already in her pocket and Margaret's eyes were too kind. "Thank you," she managed. "Those babies need their mother alive," Margaret said quietly. "Don't forget that when you're making your brave, stupid decisions." Elena carried her children down the hallway to their own apartment, set them carefully on the worn mattress they all shared. Matteo fell back asleep immediately. Luna coughed once, twice, then settled. Elena sat on the floor beside the bed and tried to think. Someone was watching, someone had found them. And the only person who had reason to look for her, the only person with the resources to actually find her, was Dominic Vale. But why? He'd made his position clear 3 years ago. He didn't want a child, didn't want the complication, unless he'd changed his mind, or unless he'd seen her tonight and curiosity had won out over indifference. Either way, she couldn't stay here. Couldn't risk her children becoming leverage, becoming pawns in whatever game Dominic was playing now. She pulled out her phone, the cheap prepaid thing she replaced every few months, and stared at it. Who could she call? She had no family, no real friends. Just Margaret and a handful of acquaintances from her various jobs who knew her as Anna, and nothing more. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her blood went cold. She almost didn't answer, almost threw the phone across the room. But what if it was work? What if it was the hospital about Luna's appointment? What if... She answered. Don't hang up. Dominic's voice, quiet, controlled. Please. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? I have people who are very good at finding things. And following people, and taking pictures of buildings. Her voice shook with rage. Was that you? Did you send someone to watch my children? Silence. Then, carefully, Your what? The word hung there between them like a grenade. Elena closed her eyes. Stupid. She'd been so stupid. The panic had made her careless. Elena. His voice had changed, gone sharp, focused. What did you just say? Nothing. I'm hanging up. If you hang up, I'll show up at your door in person, and I won't be alone. Not a threat, a statement of fact. Talk to me, please. She looked at her sleeping children, Mateo's arms still around Luna, both of them so small, so fragile, so dependent on her to keep them safe. What do you want? Her voice was tired, so tired. The truth, that's all. A pause. Were they... He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Twins, Elena said, and the word felt like stepping off a cliff. A boy and a girl. They're 3 years old, and they're none of your business. The silence stretched so long she thought the connection had dropped. Then, barely audible. Mine? Does it matter? Elena. Anna. My name is Anna, and yes, they're yours, and no, you don't get to have an opinion about it. The words came out in a rush. 3 years of anger and fear and exhaustion all spilling out at once. You made your choice. You wanted them gone. Well, I made them disappear. You're welcome. I need to see them. Absolutely not. Elena, Anna, please, I just need to... His voice cracked. Actually cracked. I have children. I have twins and I didn't know, and I need to see them. You don't get to do this. Elena stood up, moved to the window, looked out at the dark street below. Was someone watching now? You don't get to decide 3 years later that you suddenly care. They don't know you. They don't need you. We're fine. You're working 3 jobs and living in a walk-up in Queens. That's not fine. The casual mention of her address made her stomach turn. How much do you know? Enough to know you're struggling. Enough to know you're barely making rent. Enough to... He stopped, started again. I can help. I want to help. I don't want your help. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you except for you to leave us alone. I can't do that. His voice was quiet, absolute. Not now, not knowing they exist. You're married. That's complicated. I'm sure it is. Just like we were complicated. Just like everything about you is complicated. Elena's laugh was bitter. Here's what's simple. You stay away from my children. You don't call. You don't follow. You don't send your people to watch our building. You pretend tonight never happened. And if I can't, then I disappear again. And this time, I'll make sure you never find us. Elena. She hung up. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She stood there in the dark, listening to her children breathe, and tried to figure out her next move. The phone buzzed again. Same number. She turned it off. Then she started packing. Across the city, in his penthouse, Dominic Vale stood at the window and stared at his reflection in the dark glass. His phone was still in his hand. The dial tone was still ringing in his ears. Twins. He had twins. A boy and a girl, 3 years old. The numbers kept running through his head like a calculation he couldn't solve. He'd spent 3 years trying to forget Elena Cruz. 3 years building his empire higher, his walls thicker, his heart colder. 3 years telling himself he'd made the right choice. And all that time, somewhere in this city, his children had been growing up without him. That sounded intense. Vanessa stood in the doorway of his study, still wearing her gala dress. She'd been in the next room when he made the call, had probably heard every word. "Not now," Dominic said. "You have children." She said it like she was testing the words. "With the translator." "Apparently." "And you didn't know?" "No." Vanessa moved into the room, poured herself a drink from his bar. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." That's not an answer you usually give. She studied him over the rim of her glass. The Dominic Vale I know always has a plan. Always has 3 plans. This is new. He turned to face her. "Does it bother you that I have children with someone else?" "We have a business arrangement, not a love story. Your past is your business." She took a sip. "But I'm curious what happens now. You can't just ignore this." "She wants me to." "Yes, well, women who run away with your children and change their names generally aren't looking for reconciliation." Vanessa set down her glass. "The question is what you want." What did he want? That question again. The one he could never answer honestly. He wanted to see them, wanted to know what they looked like, how they sounded, whether they had Elena's smile or his eyes. Wanted to know if this boy was strong, if the girl was healthy, if they were happy. Wanted to know if they knew their father had thrown them away before they were even born. "I want to not be the villain in this story," he said quietly. "Too late for that. You already cast yourself." Vanessa moved to the door. "But if you're serious about changing the narrative, you might want to start by actually respecting what their mother wants." "Just a thought." She left. Dominic stood alone in his study and pulled up the information Marcus had sent him. An address in Queens, a building that had seen better days. A 1-bedroom apartment where Elena, Anna, lived with 2 children in a neighborhood that was 2 steps above dangerous. His children were sleeping in a walk-up in Queens. His children didn't have enough money for pancakes. His children had a mother who worked herself to exhaustion just to keep them fed. And he'd done that. His choices. His cruelty. His absolute certainty that he didn't want the complication. He'd created this. The phone on his desk rang. "Marcus." "Tell me you didn't lose her," Dominic said by way of greeting. "I didn't lose her. She went straight home, hasn't left since." A pause. "Dom, I have to ask. What's the play here?" "I don't have one." "You always have one." "Not this time." Dominic sat down, suddenly exhausted. "This time, I'm out of moves. So what do you want me to do?" "Watch the building, quietly. If anyone else shows interest, I want to know immediately." "Anyone else? Who would—" Marcus stopped. Understanding dawned. "You think your enemies might find out?" "If I found her, others can too. And if they know she matters to me—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Marcus had been in this world long enough to know how leverage worked. "I'll put a team on it. Discreet." "Marcus." Dominic's voice dropped. "She can't know they're there. If she feels watched, she'll run. And this time she'll go somewhere I can't follow." "Understood." A beat of silence. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Trying to, anyway." The call ended. Dominic sat in his empty study in his empty penthouse and wondered when doing the right thing had started to feel exactly like doing the wrong thing. Dawn came cold and gray. Elena had stayed up all night, alternating between packing essentials and watching the street below for suspicious cars, strange faces, anything that suggested the walls were closing in. Nothing. But that meant nothing. Dominic's people were professionals. If they were watching, she wouldn't see them. "Mama?" Luna's voice was small, rough from the cough that wouldn't quit. "I'm cold." Elena abandoned her vigil at the window and went to her daughter. Luna's forehead was warm, not dangerously so, but enough to worry. The cough had been getting worse for 2 weeks. She needed antibiotics, needed a proper examination, needed things that cost money Elena didn't have. "Come here, baby." She gathered Luna into her arms, felt how light she was. Too light. "We're going to get you to the doctor today, okay?" "Will they give me a shot?" "Maybe. but the shot will help you feel better. Luna considered this with the serious expression she always wore. So different from Matteo, who approached the world with fearless curiosity. Luna was cautious, thoughtful, old beyond her years in a way that broke Elena's heart. "Okay," Luna said finally, "I'll be brave." "You're always brave." Matteo emerged from the blanket fort he'd made on the floor, hair sticking up in every direction. "Is it pancake day?" Elena had forgotten her promise. The exhaustion of the night, the fear, the phone call, all of it had pushed the simple request out of her mind. "Yes," she said, because she couldn't bear to disappoint him. Pancake day. They didn't have mix, didn't have eggs, didn't have butter, but she had flour and milk and a little sugar, and she could make something that would pass for pancakes if she tried hard enough. She got the children dressed while the griddle heated, found clean clothes that didn't have holes in obvious places, brushed Luna's hair and tied it back, ran a wet washcloth over Matteo's face while he protested that he wasn't dirty. Normal morning things, the routine that kept them anchored. "Why were you packing last night?" Matteo asked with the perception that always caught her off guard. "I was just organizing," Elena lied. "Are we moving again?" "Maybe. Would that be okay?" He shrugged. "I guess. I like Margaret, though." "I like Margaret, too." The pancakes came out thin and a little burnt, but the children ate them like they were the best thing they'd ever tasted. Elena watched them and tried not to cry. This was her life. This tiny apartment, these beautiful children, this constant struggle to keep them fed and safe and healthy. It wasn't what she'd imagined 3 years ago when she left Dominic's penthouse, but it was hers. And she was good at it. Good at surviving. Good at making nothing stretch into something. But watching Luna cough into her napkin, watching Matteo eat his pancakes with the careful slowness of a child who knew food was precious, she wondered if being good at surviving was enough. The knock on the door made her freeze. "Stay here," she told the children. "Don't move." She approached the door like it might explode. Looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway. Professional clothes, expensive bag. Nothing threatening about her except her presence here, now, when Elena was already on edge. "Can I help you?" Elena called through the door. "Miss Cruz, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm a family attorney. I'd like to speak with you for a moment." Elena's blood went cold. "I didn't call a lawyer." "No, but someone who cares about your children's welfare did." A pause. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to help, please. Just 5 minutes." Elena looked back at her children. Matteo was watching her with those too aware eyes. Luna was coughing again. She opened the door but left the chain on. "How did you find me?" "I was given your address and asked to deliver some information." Sarah Chen held up a manila envelope. "That's all. No strings, no tricks." "Who sent you?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but I can tell you that this envelope contains paperwork that could make your life significantly easier." She held it out. "Please, just look at it." Every instinct screamed trap, but Elena's hand reached for the envelope anyway. Inside were documents, legal documents. She scanned them quickly, her heart pounding. A trust fund for Matteo and Luna Cruz, $500,000 each. No conditions, no requirements, just money, sitting there, waiting. And at the bottom, a note in handwriting she recognized. "I can't undo the past, but I can try to help the future. No contact necessary. This is theirs, not yours to refuse on their behalf. They deserve better than struggling. Let me give them that much." It wasn't signed, didn't need to be. Elena looked up at Sarah Chen with tears burning in her eyes. "I can't accept this." "You're not accepting it. Your children are. The trust is in their names. You're listed as the trustee, which means you can access funds for their health, education, and welfare. But it's their money." Sarah's voice was gentle. "I've been doing family law for 20 years. I've seen a lot of absent parents. This? This is someone trying to do right by children they've never met. Don't let pride get in the way of giving them what they need. He doesn't get to buy his way out of guilt. No, but he can provide for children who need medical care and warm coats and food that isn't burnt pancakes." Sarah glanced past her into the apartment. "I'm a mother too. I know what pride looks like, but I also know what love looks like. And sometimes love means accepting help you don't want to accept." She set a business card on top of the envelope. "Think about it. If you have questions or need assistance accessing the funds, call me. Anytime. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, he told me to make sure you knew this comes with no strings. He doesn't want visitation, doesn't want contact, just wants to know they'll be okay. She left. Elena stood in the hallway, holding an envelope that represented more money than she'd seen in her entire life. Money that could get Luna the medical care she needed, could get them into a better apartment, could let Elena work less and be with her children more. Money from the man who had thrown her away. Mama? Matteo appeared in the doorway. Who was that? Elena looked at her son, at his gray eyes and serious face and the trust he had that she would always know what to do. Someone trying to help, she said, and for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't sure if running was the right answer anymore. The pediatrician's office smelled like antiseptic and the kind of artificial cheerfulness that came from cartoon characters painted on walls. Luna sat on the examination table, small legs dangling, while the doctor listened to her chest with a stethoscope that was probably cold against her skin. Elena stood nearby, the trust fund paperwork folded in her purse like a secret she hadn't decided whether to keep. She'd used it. That morning, after 2 hours of staring at the documents and Sarah Chen's business card, she'd made the call. By afternoon, she had access to funds specifically designated for medical expenses. Luna needed a doctor. Pride didn't cure pneumonia. Well, Dr. Patel said, straightening up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm glad you brought her in when you did. Luna has a pretty significant respiratory infection. Nothing we can't handle, but she'll need antibiotics and rest. Lots of rest. How much rest? Elena asked, already calculating which shifts she could afford to miss. At least a week. Maybe 2. I don't want her in daycare or around other children until the infection clears. Dr. Patel typed something into her computer. I'm also seeing some concerning signs of malnutrition. Nothing critical, but Luna is underweight for her age. We need to work on getting more calories into her. The words hit like a physical blow. Malnutrition. Her daughter was malnourished because Elena couldn't afford enough food, because she'd been giving the children her portions, because survival meant constant, impossible choices. I'll make sure she eats more, Elena managed. I know you will. Dr. Patel's voice was kind, too kind. The kind of kindness that suggested she'd seen this before, knew what struggling looked like. I'm going to write you a prescription. Get it filled today if you can. And Luna, you're going to take your medicine like a good girl, right? Luna nodded seriously. I'll be brave. I know you will be. Dr. Patel handed Elena the prescription, then added quietly, there are programs, food assistance, healthcare subsidies. If you need help navigating them, we're fine, Elena said automatically. Then softer, but thank you. They left with a paper bag of sample medications and instructions Elena read 3 times to make sure she understood. Matteo held Luna's hand on the subway ride home, his small face serious. Is Luna going to be okay? He asked. Yes, baby. The medicine will help. Can I have medicine too? You're not sick. But if I get sick, will you take me to the doctor? The question shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Because until this morning, until she'd accepted help she didn't want from a man she'd spent 3 years trying to forget, the answer would have been different. Would have been about waiting to see if it got worse, about hoping it was just a cold, about the cruel mathematics of poverty. Yes, she said. Always. I promise. Back at the apartment, she got Luna settled in bed with her stuffed rabbit, the only toy that had survived 3 years of moving, gave her the first dose of medicine, smoothed her hair back, and hummed until she fell asleep. Then Elena sat at the kitchen table and stared at the trust fund documents. $500,000 per child. More money than she'd ever imagined having. Enough to change everything. Enough to make her dependent on the man who'd told her to erase their children like a mistake. Her phone rang. Not the prepaid cell. Her work phone. The diner. Anna, it's Rick. Listen, I need you to come in tonight. Cheryl's out sick and we're short-staffed. Elena looked at Luna sleeping in the next room. I can't. My daughter's sick. Doctor said she needs to rest. Can't you get a sitter? No, I can't get a sitter. Her voice came out sharper than intended. She has pneumonia, Rick. She's 3 years old. I'm not leaving her with a stranger. Silence. Then, carefully, You've missed a lot of shifts lately, Anna. I'm trying to be understanding, but I've got a business to run. The threat was implicit. Miss more shifts, lose the job, lose the job, lose the income. Even with the trust fund, she needed to work, needed the independence, needed to prove she could provide for her children without Dominic Vale's money. I'll make it up, she said. Double shifts next week. Whatever you need. We'll see. Feel better, kid. The call ended. Elena put her head in her hands and tried not to scream. This was the trap, wasn't it? The reason Dominic's money sat in her purse like a loaded gun. Because no matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she sacrificed, the system was designed to break people like her. Single mothers, immigrants, people without safety nets or second chances. And Dominic knew that, had probably counted on it. She pulled out Sarah Chen's business card, stared at the number, put it away again. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm not trying to buy you, just trying to help them. That's all it is. I promise. She should delete it. Block the number. Maintain the boundaries she'd worked so hard to establish. Instead, she typed back, "How did you know she was sick?" The response came quickly. "I didn't. Lucky timing. Or unlucky, depending on how you look at it." Is she okay? Elena stared at the words, at the casual concern, at the man who'd spent 3 years not knowing his children existed and now suddenly wanted updates on their health. She has pneumonia. Antibiotics. She'll be fine. What about you? The question caught her off guard. No one asked about her. Not anymore. She was just the mother, the provider, the one who was supposed to hold everything together without breaking. I'm fine, she typed. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. A long pause, then, fair enough. If you need anything else, medical care, better housing, whatever, it's available. No strings. Stop saying no strings. Everything has strings. Not this. I made mistakes. A lot of them. This isn't about fixing them, just about making sure my children don't pay for them. Elena's hands shook as she typed. Our children, not yours. You lost that right. She expected anger, defensiveness. The Dominic Vale she remembered didn't take well to being told what he'd lost. Instead, you're right. I'm sorry. 2 words. Simple. Devastating. She turned off her phone. In the bedroom, Luna coughed in her sleep. Matteo climbed up beside her, his small body curling protectively around his sister. They looked so peaceful, so innocent, so completely unaware that their father was a man who ruled half of Manhattan's underworld, who'd built an empire on blood and fear, who'd wanted them erased before they were even born. Elena watched them and made a decision. She would use the money. For them. For their health and safety and future. But she wouldn't let it become a leash, wouldn't let Dominic's guilt buy him access to children he'd rejected. The money was theirs. Nothing else had to be. She just had to believe that was possible. 3 blocks away, in a car with tinted windows, Marcus Chen watched the apartment building and wondered when exactly he'd become complicit in stalking a woman and her children. This feels wrong, he said into his phone. Dominic's voice came through tired. Noted. I'm serious. If she knew we were here, she'd run. I know, which is why you're being careful. Careful is a generous word for what we're doing. Marcus shifted in his seat. Dom, I've been with you since we were kids. I've done things I'm not proud of. But this? Watching a woman's apartment while her sick kid sleeps inside, this is a new low. I'm not trying to threaten her. I'm trying to protect her. From what? Silence. Long enough that Marcus knew the answer before Dominic said it. From everyone who'd use her to get to me, Dominic said finally. You know how this works. The moment word gets out that I have children, you're assuming people don't already know. What? Marcus pulled up a file on his tablet. I did some digging. Turns out you're not as clever as you think. 3 years ago, when Elena first disappeared, someone else was looking for her too. Anton Volkov's people. The name landed like a bomb. Anton Volkov ran the Russian operation in New York. He and Dominic had an arrangement. Mutual territories. No interference. Careful peace maintained through shared profit and mutual fear. But peace was fragile, and Volkov collected leverage the way other people collected art. How do you know? Dominic's voice had gone cold. Because I found their surveillance reports. They tracked her to a clinic in New Jersey, lost her after that, but they know she was pregnant. They know she ran. And if Volkov's been sitting on that information for 3 years, it's because he's waiting for the right moment to use it. Son of a... Dominic cut himself off. Does he know about the twins? Not yet. But if you keep sending lawyers and setting up trust funds, someone's going to connect the dots. More silence. Then, double the security on the building. I want eyes on every entrance. Anyone who doesn't belong in that neighborhood, I want to know about it. Dom, do it. The call ended. Marcus sat in the dark and watched lights go on and off in Elena's apartment, saw her shadow move past the window. Thought about the woman inside who disappeared to protect her children, who worked 3 jobs, who turned down $200,000 because her pride mattered more than comfort. She deserved better than this. Better than being watched by men in cars. Better than having her life dissected by people trying to keep her safe from dangers she didn't even know existed. But the world didn't care what people deserved. His phone buzzed. A text from one of the other security guys. Car just parked across the street. 2 men inside. Not ours. Marcus was already moving, hand on his weapon, when he saw them. Black sedan. Professional grade. The kind of car that screamed organized crime trying to look legitimate. He took photos of the license plate, ran it through the database, came back registered to a shell company. 3 more searches revealed the shell company had ties to Volkov's operation. So it had started. Marcus made a call. We've got company, Russian, 2 men. Just watching for now. Don't engage, Dominic said. Just observe. And when they make a move, then we make sure they regret it. The line went dead. Marcus settled back into his seat and watched the watchers. This was how wars started. Not with declarations or grand gestures, but with cars parked on dark streets and men taking notes about women who just wanted to live their lives in peace. Elena had no idea her apartment had become a battlefield. And Dominic had no idea his attempts to protect his children had just painted the biggest target on their backs. Inside the apartment, Elena woke to Luna's crying. Not the normal fussy cry of a tired child, but something sharper, painful. She was at her daughter's side in seconds. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Hurts," Luna gasped between sobs. "Mama, it hurts." Elena felt her forehead, burning. The fever had spiked despite the medicine. Luna's breathing was labored, each inhale sounding wet and wrong. Okay, we're going to the hospital." Elena was already moving, grabbing her phone, her purse, the diaper bag that still had emergency supplies, even though the kids were long past needing diapers. "Mateo, wake up. We have to go." "What's wrong with Luna?" Mateo's voice was scared. "She's just sick, baby. The hospital will help." She wrapped Luna in a blanket, gathered Mateo, headed for the door. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the lock. The hallway was empty. The building was silent. Outside, the street was dark except for street lights and the occasional passing car. She didn't notice the black sedan, didn't notice the second car that pulled up behind it, didn't notice the 2 men who got out and started walking toward her building. She was too focused on getting Luna to the emergency room, on the way her daughter's breathing sounded wrong, on the fear that gripped her throat and wouldn't let go. The elevator was broken. Of course it was. She carried Luna down 3 flights of stairs while Mateo followed, his small hand gripping the railing. Outside, the cold air hit like a slap. Luna whimpered against her shoulder. Elena looked up and down the street for a taxi, saw none, pulled out her phone to call for a car. That's when she saw them. 2 men, walking toward her with purpose, not running, not threatening, just approaching with the kind of confidence that suggested they knew exactly who she was. Elena's blood went cold. She turned to run back inside, but one of the men was already blocking the door. "Miss Cruz," he said. "Not a question. We need to talk. I don't know you. Get away from my children. We're not here to hurt you. We just have some questions about Dominic Vale." The name hit like a punch. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, Ms. Cruz, we know about the children. We know he's been sending money. We just want to talk." Luna was crying harder now, her fever-bright eyes confused and scared. Mateo pressed against Elena's leg, sensing danger even if he didn't understand it. "My daughter is sick," Elena said, her voice shaking. "I need to get her to a hospital. Whatever you want, It can wait. The man stepped closer, and suddenly there were other people there, moving fast, professional. One of them, Marcus, though Elena didn't know his name yet, stepped between her and the Russian operative with the kind of calm that suggested violence was always an option. "The lady said her daughter is sick," Marcus said quietly. "So you're going to step aside and let her get to the hospital, and then you're going to get back in your car and drive away. Understood? This doesn't concern you. Everything concerning them concerns me." Marcus's hand rested casually near his jacket, not threatening, just informative. "Now move." For a moment, the street was frozen. Two groups of dangerous men staring each other down while a terrified mother held her sick child and tried to understand what was happening. Then the Russian operative smiled. "Tell Dominic we'll be in touch." They left. Marcus turned to Elena, his face carefully neutral. "Ma'am, I have a car around the corner. I can get you to the hospital faster than a taxi." "Who are you?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Someone trying to help. Please. Your daughter needs a doctor." He was right. Luna's breathing was getting worse. Elena didn't have time to ask questions or demand answers. She nodded. Marcus led them to a black SUV. Professional, expensive. The kind of car that screamed money and power and everything Elena had been running from. But Luna was burning up and struggling to breathe, and pride didn't save children. She got in. Marcus drove fast but smooth, navigating traffic with the ease of someone who knew every shortcut. In the back seat, Elena held Luna and tried to keep breathing herself. Matteo was silent, his gray eyes watching everything. "Who were those men?" Elena asked. "People you don't need to worry about anymore." "That's not an answer." Marcus met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "No, but it's all I can give you right now. What I can tell you is that you and your children are safe. That's not going to change." "Because of Dominic, yes. I didn't ask for his protection." "No, but you have it anyway." Marcus pulled up to the emergency room entrance. "Go. Take care of your daughter. I'll wait here." "I don't need you to wait." "Ma'am, with respect, you don't get to decide that anymore. The moment those men showed up at your building, this situation changed. So I'm going to wait here, and when you're done, I'm going to drive you home. And tomorrow we're going to have a conversation about what happens next, okay?" It wasn't okay. None of this was okay. But Luna was limp in her arms, and the emergency room doors were right there, and Elena was so tired of fighting. "Fine," she said. She carried her daughter inside while Matteo held tight to her coat. The ER was bright and loud, and full of people who all looked as desperate as she felt. She gave Luna's name to the triage nurse, explained about the pneumonia, the fever, the breathing. They took Luna back immediately. Elena sat in the waiting room with Matteo curled against her side and felt her carefully constructed world crumbling. For 3 years, she'd kept them safe by staying invisible. Now, in one night, she'd been found by Dominic's people and threatened by men who knew her name and used her children as leverage. Her phone buzzed. "Dominic. Marcus said there was an incident. Are you okay? Is Luna okay?" She stared at the text, at the casual way he had information about her life, at the infrastructure of protection she'd never asked for wrapping around her like a cage. "We're at the hospital. Don't contact me again." "Elena, I mean it. Whatever you think you're doing, whatever you think you're protecting us from, stop. Leave us alone. I can't. Not anymore. Those men tonight, they work for Anton Volkov. I don't care who he is. I don't care about your enemies or your empire or whatever war you're fighting. My daughter is sick. My son is terrified. And all of this is happening because you couldn't just let us go. If I'd let you go, those men would have taken you tonight. Do you understand that? They weren't there to talk. They were there to use you and your children to get to me. And they would have succeeded if my people hadn't been there. Your people were only there because you sent them. You did this. You put us in danger by finding us. I put you in danger 3 years ago when I let you walk away pregnant and alone. This is me trying to fix that mistake. You can't fix it. It's not fixable. Just let us go." She turned off her phone. A doctor emerged from the back, young, tired, the universal look of medical professionals working overnight shifts. "Ms. Cruz? Luna's stable. The fever spiked because of the infection, but we've got her on IV antibiotics and fluids. She's going to be fine. but we'd like to keep her overnight for observation. Relief hit so hard, Elena nearly collapsed. Can I see her? Of course. Follow me. Luna was in a bed that looked too big for her small body, an IV line in her arm, oxygen tubing under her nose. But her eyes were open, and she managed a small smile when she saw her mother. Mama, I got medicine. You did, baby. You're so brave. Elena smoothed her hair back, kissed her forehead. How do you feel? Tired? Then sleep. I'll be right here. Luna's eyes drifted closed. Within minutes, she was asleep. Real sleep this time, not the fever dream restlessness from before. Mateo climbed into the chair beside the bed, curled up like a cat, and fell asleep too. Elena sat in the quiet hospital room and watched her children breathe. Outside, Marcus waited in a car. Somewhere in the city, Dominic sat in his penthouse and orchestrated protection she'd never asked for. Men with guns watched her building. Enemies circled like sharks sensing blood in the water, and she had no idea how to keep her children safe anymore. The trust fund paperwork was still in her purse, the lawyer's business card, the evidence that Dominic Vale had decided 3 years too late that his children mattered. Elena pulled out her phone and sent one more text before turning it off completely. If you really want to help, tell me the truth. All of it. Who those men were. Why they want us. What kind of danger we're actually in. I can't protect my children if I don't understand what I'm protecting them from. The response came immediately. Tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. I promise. She didn't believe him, but she didn't have any better options. So she sat in the hospital room and waited for morning when the truth, whatever it turned out to be, would finally catch up with the lies she'd been running from. Morning came with the antiseptic smell of hospital and the soft beeping of monitors. Elena had barely slept, dozing in the uncomfortable chair while nurses came and went, checking Luna's vitals, adjusting her IV. Each time the door opened, her heart jumped, half expecting to see more strange men, more threats, more evidence that her careful anonymity had shattered completely. But it was only medical staff, kind faces, gentle hands, people who saw a sick child and a tired mother and nothing more sinister than that. Luna woke around 7, her fever broken, her breathing easier. The transformation was remarkable. Yesterday she'd been limp and burning. This morning she was sitting up, asking for juice, complaining that the IV hurt. You're feeling better, Elena said, relief flooding through her. The medicine worked. Luna touched the oxygen tube under her nose. Can I take this off? Let's ask the doctor first. Mateo stirred in his chair, rubbed his eyes, looked around the hospital room with confusion that slowly cleared into memory. Is Luna okay now? I'm okay, Luna answered before Elena could. See? I told you I'd be brave. The doctor came by during rounds, young and efficient, explaining that Luna could go home this afternoon if her oxygen levels stayed stable. More antibiotics. More rest. Instructions Elena committed to memory with the intensity of someone who couldn't afford mistakes. You have good insurance, the doctor noted, glancing at her chart. The coverage is excellent. That's fortunate. Elena froze. What? Your insurance. It's covering everything. Private plan, very comprehensive. The doctor smiled. These medications can get expensive without good coverage. Elena hadn't had insurance in 3 years, couldn't afford it, had been using the free clinic and praying nothing serious happened. Dominic, it had to be. Another piece of infrastructure wrapping around her life without permission. Right, she managed. Fortunate. After the doctor left, Elena pulled out her phone. 37 missed messages, most from work, 2 from Margaret, the rest from Dominic. She read his first. I added you and the children to my health insurance. Should have done it months ago. Don't argue about this one. They need proper medical care. Then, Marcus said Luna's stable. Thank God. Then, I meant what I said about telling you everything. Whenever you're ready to talk, I'll be there. Just say when. And finally, sent at 3 a.m. I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I destroyed that right 3 years ago. But those children are mine too, and I will do whatever it takes to keep them safe, even if that means you hate me forever. I can live with that. I can't live with them getting hurt because I was too much of a coward to face what I did. Elena stared at the words. at the raw honesty that felt nothing like the cold, controlled man who'd offered her money to erase her pregnancy. This Dominic sounded broken, desperate, human in a way that terrified her more than his cruelty ever had. Because cruelty she could fight. Cruelty gave her permission to hate him, to keep him away, to protect her children from his toxic world. But this? Guilt and desperation and what might actually be genuine remorse? That was harder to armor against. She typed, "Coffee shop on Amsterdam and 82nd. 2 hours. Come alone." His response was immediate. "I'll be there." "Thank you." She turned off her phone and tried to figure out what she was going to say to the father of her children. The man she'd loved once. The man who'd broken her so thoroughly she'd rebuilt herself into someone new just to survive. Luna was watching her with those dark, too perceptive eyes. "Mama, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, baby. Just tired." "You're always tired." The observation shouldn't have hurt, but it did, because it was true. For 3 years, Elena had been running on fumes and fear and the desperate determination to give her children something better than she'd had. And all that time, Dominic had been living in his penthouse, building his empire, married to someone else, while his children grew up in poverty. The anger felt good, clean, easier than the complicated mess of other emotions trying to surface. She held on to it. 2 hours later, Luna was discharged with a bag of medications and strict instructions about rest. Marcus was waiting in the parking garage, leaning against the same black SUV from last night. He straightened when he saw them. "Ms. Cruz, how's she doing?" "Better." Elena shifted Luna's weight on her hip. "You don't need to drive us." "I'm afraid I do." Marcus opened the rear door. "Mr. Vale's orders." "I don't take orders from Dominic Vale." "No, ma'am, but I do." His voice was respectful but firm. "And my orders are to make sure you and your children get where you need to go safely. So please, let me do my job." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to grab Mateo's hand and walk away, call a taxi, maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to preserve. But Luna was heavy in her arms and Mateo looked exhausted, and the thought of navigating the subway with a sick child made her want to cry. She got in the car. Marcus drove them to the apartment in Queens, silent and professional. When they arrived, he did a quick sweep of the building before letting them out. "I'll be nearby," he said. "If you need anything—" "I'm meeting Dominic at 2, Elena interrupted. "At a coffee shop in Manhattan. I need you to watch the children." Marcus blinked. "Ma'am, I'm security, not a babysitter." "Then consider it securing the most valuable assets Dominic has." She met his eyes. "I'm not bringing them to this meeting, and I'm not leaving them with strangers. So either you watch them, or I don't go." For a long moment, Marcus just stared at her. Then something like respect crossed his face. "Okay," he said. "I'll watch them." "What do 3-year-olds eat?" "Mateo likes chicken nuggets. Luna likes anything if you make it fun." Elena paused. "There are toys in the living room. Books. Don't let them watch too much TV. And if Luna starts coughing badly, there's an inhaler in the bathroom." "Got it." Marcus looked mildly terrified. "Anything else?" "Yeah. If anyone comes to this building who isn't me or Margaret from next door, you get my children out. I don't care how. Just keep them safe." "That's the job, ma'am." Inside the apartment, Elena got Luna settled on the couch with her rabbit and a blanket. Gave Mateo instructions to be good and listen to Marcus. Tried not to think about the fact that she was leaving her children with a stranger who worked for a man she didn't trust. But Marcus had saved them last night, had gotten Luna to the hospital, and the way he'd positioned himself between her and those other men suggested he actually would die to protect them if it came to that. It would have to be enough. She changed into clean clothes, pulled her hair back, looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked exhausted, haunted. Nothing like the woman who'd once believed Dominic Vale when he'd promised her something better. That woman was gone. This one knew better. She took the subway to Manhattan, emerged into the cold afternoon air, found the coffee shop 3 blocks from the address she'd given him. Small, anonymous, the kind of place where people had quiet conversations and no one paid attention. Dominic was already there, sitting at a corner table, staring at an untouched cup of coffee. He'd dressed down, jeans, a sweater, no suit, trying to look normal, approachable. He looked up when she walked in, and something in his face cracked open. "Elena." Anna, she corrected, sitting down across from him. Elena doesn't exist anymore. Right. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop hummed around them. Life continued as normal while they tried to figure out how to talk to each other. Thank you for coming, Dominic said finally. You said you'd tell me the truth. I will. All of it. He took a breath. But first I need to say something. I need you to know that everything I'm about to tell you, everything I've done in the past week, it's not about controlling you. It's not about buying my way into their lives. It's about keeping them safe from something I caused. Which is? Anton Volkov. Dominic said the name like it tasted bitter. He runs the Russian operation in New York. We have an arrangement, mutual territories, no interference. It's worked for years, but 3 years ago, when you disappeared, he had people looking for you. They tracked you to a clinic in New Jersey, lost you after that. But they knew you were pregnant, and they've been sitting on that information ever since. Elena's blood went cold. Why would they care? Because information is currency in my world. Leverage is power. And a pregnant woman who vanished right after breaking up with me? That's potential leverage. Dominic's hands tightened around his coffee cup. I didn't know about it until 2 days ago. I thought I'd kept you hidden, kept you safe. I was wrong. So those men last night were Volkov's people, confirming what they'd suspected, that you have my children, that I care enough about you to set up trust funds and health insurance and protection. He met her eyes. I made you visible. I put you in danger. That's on me. The honesty was almost worse than lies would have been. Elena had spent 3 years believing her invisibility kept them safe. Now she was learning that invisibility had been an illusion, and the real danger had been circling for years. What does he want? She asked. Leverage, control, a way to manipulate my decisions. Dominic leaned forward. There's a territory dispute brewing. Docks, import operations, worth hundreds of millions. Volkov wants them. I control them. With you and the children as pressure points, he could make you give him what he wants. Elena finished the thought, felt sick. So what do we do? We? Dominic's voice caught on the word. You said I'm in danger, that my children are in danger. So what do we do to fix it? She said it coldly, clinically, refusing to let emotion cloud the practicality of survival. I assume you have a plan. I do, but you're not going to like it. I don't like any of this. Tell me anyway. Dominic pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Inside were documents, legal papers, custody agreements, security assessments. I need you to move, he said. You and the children, somewhere secure, somewhere my people can actually protect you properly. Absolutely not. Elena, Anna, and no. I'm not moving into some safe house under your control. That's exactly what I've been trying to avoid for 3 years. This isn't about control. This is about the fact that your apartment has one entrance, no security, and is in a neighborhood where no one would notice if someone took you in the middle of the night. His voice was tight with frustration. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying to keep you alive. By making us dependent on you, by putting us somewhere you control every aspect of our lives. Elena shoved the folder back. No, find another way. There is no other way. Not one that keeps you safe. Then I'll take my chances. With your children's lives, Dominic's control cracked. You'd rather maintain your independence than accept help that could save them? The accusation hit like a slap. Don't you dare. Don't you dare question my commitment to my children. I've been keeping them safe for 3 years without your help. By hiding. By running. By working yourself to death so they could eat. He leaned forward. I'm not criticizing you. I'm in awe of you. What you've done with nothing. It's remarkable. But the situation has changed. Hiding won't work anymore. Running won't work. You need actual protection. From your enemies, who only care about us because of you. Elena's voice shook. You see the problem, right? You're both the danger and the solution. And I'm supposed to just trust that your solution won't become its own kind of cage? Dominic sat back, ran a hand through his hair. For a moment he looked lost. Young, nothing like the cold, powerful man who'd thrown her away. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. Tell me. Because I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to keep you safe and respect your independence and make up for 3 years of mistakes all at once. So just tell me what you need and I'll do it. Elena stared at him, at the desperation in his eyes, at the evidence of sleepless nights and guilt that was eating him alive. I need the truth, she said. Not just about Volkov, about everything. About why you really sent me away 3 years ago. About why you're married to someone else but suddenly care about children you wanted me to abort. About what you actually want from us. Okay. Dominic took a shaky breath. Okay. The truth. He looked down at his hands, then back up at her. 3 years ago, I sent you away because I was terrified. Not of being a father, of being my father. The words came out raw. He was a monster, brutal, mean. He taught me that love was weakness, that caring about anyone gave them power to destroy you. And I believed him. I built my entire life around that belief. Elena stayed silent, letting him talk. When you told me you were pregnant, all I could think was that I would do to that child what my father did to me. That I would turn them into something cold and broken and incapable of feeling anything real. His voice cracked. So I pushed you away, told myself I was protecting you from me, that you'd be better off struggling alone than trapped with someone who didn't know how to love anything. And now? Now I know I was wrong, that I didn't protect you from anything. I just made everything harder. He met her eyes. I'm married to Vanessa because my world requires certain appearances, power couples, strategic alliances. She knows it's not real. So do I. It's just business. That's bleak. My entire life is bleak, has been since I was 8 years old and learned that the only way to survive was to stop feeling. He leaned forward. But then I saw you across that ballroom, and everything I'd buried came roaring back. And when you told me I had children, twins, I felt something I haven't felt in 20 years. What? Hope. The word was barely a whisper. Hope that maybe I could be something other than what my father made me. That maybe those children could know a version of me that isn't just violence and control and fear. Elena's throat tightened. This was the man she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, the one who'd shown her glimpses of vulnerability between the walls, the one she'd believed she could save. You can't use our children to redeem yourself, she said quietly. That's not fair to them. I know. I'm not asking to be their father. I know I lost that right. His hands were shaking. I'm asking for a chance to keep them safe, to give them the resources I never had, to make sure that whatever happens in my world, they never pay the price for my mistakes. And what do you want from me? The question hung there. Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I want you to not hate me, he said. I want you to believe that I'm trying. He stopped, started again. I want to deserve you, deserve them, but I know that ship has sailed. So I'll settle for keeping you alive and hoping that someday you might be able to forgive me for being too broken to choose you when it mattered. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. This was too much, too honest, too close to the version of Dominic she'd once loved. I can't trust you, she said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You hurt me too badly. I know. But I can't keep my children safe alone. Not from this. She took a shaky breath. So here's what's going to happen. I'll move somewhere more secure, but I choose the place. I choose the security arrangements. Your people can advise, but I have final say. Okay. And you don't get to see them. Not yet. Not until I decide you've earned that right. The words clearly hurt him, but he nodded. Okay. And if I ever feel like you're trying to control me, trying to trap me, trying to make me dependent, I'm gone. I'll disappear so completely you'll never find me again. Understood? Understood. Elena stood up. I need to get back to my children. Marcus is watching them, and he looked terrified. For the first time, Dominic smiled. Small. Sad. Marcus was a special forces operative for 6 years. Pretty sure he can handle 2 3-year-olds. You've clearly never met Matteo when he's bored. She turned to leave. Elena. His voice stopped her. Thank you. For giving me a chance. I know I don't deserve it. You don't. She looked back at him. But they deserve to be safe, and right now you're the best option for making that happen. Don't make me regret this. I won't, I promise. She left the coffee shop and didn't look back. On the subway ride home, she let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear, the anger, the terrible traitorous hope that maybe, just maybe, Dominic Vale had actually changed. But hope was dangerous. Hope got people hurt. So she buried it deep and focused on what mattered. Keeping her children safe, maintaining her independence, and making sure that whatever arrangement they worked out, it didn't cost her the life she'd built from nothing. The apartment was chaos when she got back. Mateo had built a fort out of every blanket they owned. Luna was directing him like a tiny general. And Marcus sat on the floor surrounded by toy cars, looking shell-shocked. "They're creative," he said when Elena walked in. "I'll give them that." "Mama!" Luna scrambled over. "Marcus doesn't know how to play rescue properly. You have to make the siren sounds." "Noted." Elena looked at Marcus. "How bad was it?" "Let's just say I have a newfound respect for parents everywhere." He stood, brushed off his pants. "They're good kids, smart, observant. The boy asked me 7 times who I worked for and why I had a gun." "What did you tell him?" "That I work for someone who wants to keep them safe." Seemed to satisfy him. Marcus headed for the door, then paused. "How'd it go? With Dominic?" "We're moving, somewhere more secure. He'll send you the details to coordinate." "Good, that's good." Marcus nodded. "For what it's worth, he's trying. I've known him since we were kids, never seen him care about anything the way he cares about this, about you, about them. Caring isn't the same as changing. No, but it's a start." Marcus opened the door. "I'll be around. Call if you need anything." He left. Elena locked the door and leaned against it, exhausted. In the living room, her children played like nothing had changed, like they were still just a normal family in a tiny apartment, safe and invisible and whole. But everything had changed, and Elena had no idea if she'd made the right choice, trusting the man who'd broken her to keep their children safe from dangers he'd created. She just knew she was out of options, and that sometimes survival meant accepting help from the last person you wanted to depend on. Mateo appeared in the doorway, his gray eyes, his father's eyes, serious and searching. "Mama, are we going to be okay?" Elena knelt down and pulled him into a hug. "Yes, baby. We're going to be okay." She hoped she wasn't lying, but hope and truth had stopped being the same thing a long time ago. The new apartment was in a building that looked like any other on the Upper West Side. Brick facade, understated entrance, the kind of place wealthy people lived without advertising it. But Elena noticed the details that marked it as different. The doorman, who was clearly more than a doorman, the way his eyes scanned every person who approached. The cameras positioned at angles that covered every entrance. The reinforced door frames. This wasn't just an apartment. It was a fortress disguised as a home. "What do you think?" Marcus stood beside her on the sidewalk, holding Luna, while Mateo gripped Elena's hand and stared up at the building with wide eyes. "It's a lot," Elena said. "It's safe. 3rd floor, corner unit, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Building has 24-hour security, controlled access, and every tenant has been thoroughly vetted." He shifted Luna's weight. "Dominic owns the building, has for years, uses it for people who need protection." How many people need protection in his world? More than you'd think. Marcus headed for the entrance. "Come on, I'll show you around." The apartment was beautiful in a way that made Elena's chest tight. Hardwood floors, large windows with actual light, a kitchen with appliances that all worked, bedrooms big enough for real beds, real furniture, real childhoods. The children ran through it with the kind of joy only kids who'd never had space could understand. Mateo claimed the room with the dinosaur wallpaper. Luna wanted the one with the window seat that looked out over the street. "We can paint it any color you want," Marcus told her. "Princess colors, if you like." "I like purple," Luna said seriously. "And stars." "Purple and stars. I'll make a note." Elena stood in the middle of the living room and tried not to cry. This was what she'd wanted for them: space, safety, light. But accepting it felt like surrendering something fundamental about who they were, about the life she'd built through pure stubborn will. "There's a park 2 blocks away," Marcus was saying. "Good playground. The elementary school in the district is excellent, and there's a pediatrician in the building who's agreed to take Luna on as a patient." "Of course there is." Elena's voice came out sharper than intended. Dominic thinks of everything. He's trying. I know, that's what scares me. She turned to Marcus. What does he want from this? Really? Because people don't just hand over luxury apartments and comprehensive security without expecting something in return. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the children explore their new rooms. Then he said, Can I tell you something? Off the record? Okay. I've known Dominic since we were 8 years old. We grew up in the same group home after his father went to prison and my parents died. He was already broken by then, already convinced he was going to turn into his father no matter what he did. Marcus leaned against the wall. I watched him build his empire, watched him turn himself into exactly what he was afraid of becoming: cold, calculating, capable of terrible things. This isn't making me feel better. I'm getting there. Marcus smiled slightly. 2 weeks ago, he called me at 3 a.m., completely falling apart. Said he had children he didn't know about, that he'd made the worst mistake of his life 3 years ago, and he didn't know how to fix it. I've never heard him sound like that. Vulnerable, scared, human. Elena swallowed hard. What did you tell him? That he couldn't fix it. Not really, but he could try to do better going forward. Marcus met her eyes. He doesn't want anything from you except the knowledge that his children are safe. That's it. No control, no access, just safety. Because for the first time in his life, he cares about something more than his empire. And what happens when that changes? When he gets bored or the novelty wears off? Then I'll help you disappear so thoroughly he'll never find you again. Marcus said it with such absolute certainty that Elena believed him. I'm loyal to Dominic, but I'm not blind to what he is. And those kids deserve better than being chess pieces in his world. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Cruz? A woman's voice, professional. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with NYPD. I need to speak with you about an incident last night involving 2 men outside your previous residence. Elena's blood went cold. What kind of incident? The kind that involves questioning. Can you come down to the station? I have 2 young children. I can't just... I can come to you. What's your current address? Elena gave it, her mind racing. What had happened? Had someone been arrested? Were the men from last night in custody? Detective Morrison arrived 30 minutes later. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen everything and believed nothing. She accepted Elena's offer of coffee and sat at the kitchen table like they were old friends. I'll cut to the chase, Morrison said. Last night, 2 men were picked up near your old building, Russians. Low-level muscle working for Anton Volkov. They're claiming they were there on business. But witnesses say they were confronting you and your children before some other men intervened. I don't know anything about that, Elena said carefully. Really? Because their story matches the timeline of your daughter's hospital admission. And the men who intervened? Their description matches known associates of Dominic Vale. Morrison pulled out a photo. Do you know this man? It was Marcus. Elena kept her face neutral. No. Ms. Cruz, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here because Anton Volkov and Dominic Vale are dangerous men. And when dangerous men start circling a young mother with children, that's when people get hurt. Morrison leaned forward. If you're in some kind of trouble, if Vale is threatening you or forcing you into something, he's not. Then why did you move apartments overnight? Why is there suddenly a security detail watching this building? Why are you on Dominic Vale's health insurance? Morrison's voice was kind but relentless. I've been working organized crime for 15 years. I know how this goes. They start with help, protection, money. Then suddenly you're trapped and you can't get out. Elena thought about the trust funds, the apartment, the security, everything Dominic had wrapped around them in less than a week. What do you want me to say? She asked quietly. I want you to tell me the truth. Are you safe? Are your children safe? The question sat there between them. Was she safe? She didn't know anymore. The threats from Volkov were real. The protection from Dominic was real, but so was the cage forming around them, invisible bars made of money and security and dependence. My children are safe, Elena said finally. That's what matters. And you? I'm managing. Morrison studied her face for a long moment. Then she pulled out a card, set it on the table. My direct line. If that changes, if you need help getting out, if anything happens, you call me. Anytime, day or night. Thank you. One more thing. Morrison stood. Dominic Vale might seem like he's helping now, but men like him don't change. They just get better at hiding what they are. Don't forget that. She left. Elena sat at the kitchen table in her beautiful new apartment and stared at the detective's card. In the next room, her children played with toys Marcus had brought. New toys, expensive toys, the kind she'd never been able to afford. Everything was better now. Everything was safer. So why did it feel like the walls were closing in? Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. The detective came by? Are you okay? Of course he knew. Probably had someone watching the building, monitoring who came and went. I'm fine. She's concerned about the incident last night. I handled it. The men won't be a problem anymore. What does handled mean? A long pause. Then, do you really want to know? No. She didn't. Because knowing meant being complicit, meant crossing a line from victim to participant in whatever dark world Dominic inhabited. Just tell me they won't come back. They won't. I promise. She set down her phone and tried to figure out how she'd gotten here. 1 week ago, she'd been scraping by, invisible and safe in her anonymity. Now she was living in luxury, protected by dangerous men, tied to someone she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. The knock on the door made her jump. Marcus checked the security camera first, then opened it. Margaret stood in the hallway, her weathered face creased with concern. They told me you moved, Margaret said. Didn't even say goodbye. It happened fast. Elena felt guilt wash over her. I'm sorry. I should have... Should have what? You were running. I know running when I see it. Margaret came inside, looked around at the apartment. This is nice, safe, good for the children. It's Dominic's, Elena said. The building, the apartment, all of it. The father? Elena nodded. Margaret sat down at the kitchen table, same spot Detective Morrison had occupied minutes before. You going to tell me the whole story? Or just the parts you think I can handle? So Elena told her. Everything. The pregnancy, the rejection, the 3 years of hiding, the gala, the confrontation, the men outside her old building, Dominic's sudden reappearance, and the infrastructure of protection that had wrapped around them overnight. Margaret listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, the older woman was quiet for a long time. That's a hell of a story, she said finally. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I made the right choice accepting his help. Did your children eat breakfast this morning? The question caught Elena off guard. Yes? Why? Did they eat enough? Or did you have to ration it out, make sure there was enough for tomorrow too? Elena's throat tightened. They ate enough. And when Luna gets sick again, will you be able to afford her medicine? Or will you have to choose between medication and rent? I can afford it now. The trust fund, exactly. Margaret reached across the table, took Elena's hand. I know you're scared. I know accepting help from him feels like betraying everything you built. But those babies need their mother alive and healthy and not working herself to death. If his guilt money keeps you all safe and fed, that's not weakness. That's wisdom. But what if he changes his mind? What if he decides he wants control after all? Then you leave. Same as you would have anyway. Margaret squeezed her hand. You've been running for 3 years because you thought you had to do it alone. Maybe it's time to accept that you don't. That asking for help, even from someone who hurt you, isn't the same as giving up. In the other room, Luna started coughing. Not the terrible wet cough from before, but enough to make Elena's heart clench. She moved instinctively, but the cough subsided before she reached the bedroom. The medicine was working. The treatment Dominic's insurance had paid for was keeping her daughter healthy. That had to count for something. Margaret left with promises to visit soon, to meet the children at the park, to stay in their lives even though the geography had changed. Elena walked her to the door and felt the last connection to her old life walking away. Then she turned back to her new one and tried to make peace with it. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Morning routines in an apartment where everything worked. Walks to the park with Marcus trailing at a discreet distance. Luna's health improving with proper medication and regular meals. Mateo's energy finding outlets in space that was actually theirs. Elena started working again, but differently. A remote position translating documents, arranged through connections she suspected came from Dominic but couldn't prove. It paid better than all three of her old jobs combined and let her be home with the children. She didn't hear from Dominic directly. Just occasional texts asking if they needed anything, if Luna was feeling better, if the apartment was working out. Never pushy. Never demanding. Just there, like a shadow at the edge of their lives. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like the pressure valve on her life had finally released. 2 weeks into the new normal, Marcus appeared at her door with an unusual expression. "There's someone here to see you," he said. "Says it's important." "Who?" "Dominic's wife." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "Vanessa Vale. She's downstairs, asking if you'll meet with her." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I can send her away if you want." Every instinct screamed to say yes, to refuse, to maintain the careful distance she'd established, but curiosity won out. "Give me 5 minutes." But she changed into clean clothes, checked on the children who were occupied with building blocks, and took the elevator down to the lobby where a woman who looked like she belonged on magazine covers waited with perfect posture and careful neutrality. "Ms. Cruz," Vanessa said, "thank you for seeing me. What do you want?" "To talk, honestly." Vanessa gestured to the seating area in the lobby. "Please, 5 minutes." They sat. Vanessa crossed her legs, perfectly composed, and said, "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to tell you the truth about my marriage to Dominic. I don't need— it's a business arrangement, nothing more. We have separate bedrooms, separate lives. The marriage exists for appearances, for strategic alliances in his world, and connections in mine." Vanessa's voice was matter-of-fact. "We have an understanding. I don't interfere with his life. He doesn't interfere with mine. It works." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know that whatever you think is happening, whatever guilt or hesitation you feel about accepting his help because he's married, it's not real. The marriage isn't real." Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "And because I've watched him fall apart over the past 2 weeks. I've seen him stare at photos of children he's never met. I've heard him on the phone at 3 a.m. trying to arrange better security, better insurance, better everything. He's obsessed with keeping them safe. That's not my problem. No, but it's going to become yours if you don't understand what's actually happening." Vanessa's voice softened. "He loves you, still, maybe more than before. And those children? They're not just his genetic legacy. They're his chance to be something other than his father. You hold all the power here, not him, so stop acting like you're the one trapped." Elena stared at her. "He sent you to say this." He doesn't know I'm here. Would probably be furious if he found out." Vanessa stood. "I'm telling you this because I've spent 5 years watching Dominic Vale be the coldest, most calculating person I've ever met. And in 2 weeks, you've turned him into someone who actually feels things. That's power. Use it wisely." She left before Elena could respond. Elena sat in the lobby of her building, Dominic's building, and tried to process what just happened. Vanessa's words echoed, "You hold all the power here." Did she? It didn't feel like power. Felt like being pulled in directions she hadn't chosen, forced into proximity with a man who'd destroyed her once before. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she'd been so focused on maintaining independence that she'd missed the fact that Dominic had given her everything she asked for, the apartment she chose, the security she approved, the distance she demanded. He hadn't tried to see the children, hadn't pushed for access, hadn't done anything except try to keep them safe while respecting every boundary she'd set. That was power. The power to set terms. The power to choose. She just had to decide what to do with it. That night, after the children were asleep, Elena stood at her window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Dominic sat in his penthouse, probably staring at his own window, thinking about children he'd never held. She pulled out her phone and typed before she could overthink it. They ask questions sometimes, about their father. I don't know what to tell them. The response came quickly. Tell them the truth, that he made mistakes, that he's trying to fix them, that he loves them even though he doesn't know them. Do you love them? More than I thought possible. More than anything. Elena's hands shook as she typed, Mateo has your eyes. Luna has your stubbornness. They're smart, funny, kind in ways that terrify me because the world isn't kind back. They have you. That's all they need. That's not true anymore. They need security, stability, things I couldn't give them alone. You gave them everything that matters. I'm just filling in the gaps. She wanted to believe that, wanted to believe this arrangement could work without costing her everything she'd built. Thank you, she typed, for the apartment, the insurance, the protection, for not trying to take more than I can give. I don't deserve thanks. I'm just trying to be less of a disaster. You're doing okay. Mostly. She could almost hear him laugh through the screen. Can I ask you something? He typed. Maybe. Do you think, someday they might want to meet me? The question hit harder than expected, because someday they would ask. Someday Mateo would want to know why his father wasn't there. Luna would wonder why other kids had dads, and she didn't. Someday, she typed. When they're ready. When I'm ready. Not yet. Okay, I can wait. Can you? Waiting isn't really your strength. I'm learning. You're an excellent teacher. Elena smiled despite herself. This felt almost normal, almost like the conversations they used to have before everything went wrong. I should go. Early morning tomorrow. Sweet dreams, Elena. Anna, she corrected gently. Right, sorry. Sweet dreams, Anna. She set down her phone and realized her heart wasn't racing anymore. The panic that had accompanied every interaction with Dominic for the past 2 weeks had faded into something else. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The call came 3 days later at 2 a.m. Marcus's voice, tight with urgency. Get the children. Now. We're moving you. Elena was awake instantly. What happened? Volkov made a move. Tried to hit one of Dominic's operations. It went badly. There's going to be retaliation and we can't risk you being anywhere predictable. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Completely off the grid. Dominic's already there. He'll explain everything. 20 minutes later, Elena and her sleepy children were in an SUV with darkened windows. Marcus driving through empty streets while 2 other security vehicles flanked them. Mateo was quiet, his gray eyes alert despite the hour. Luna dozed against Elena's shoulder. They drove for over an hour, leaving the city behind, heading into countryside Elena didn't recognize. Finally, they pulled up to a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Modern, isolated, beautiful in a way that screamed money and security. Dominic met them at the door. He looked different. No suit, just jeans and a sweater. His hair was messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. And when he saw the children, his children, for the first time, everything in his face just broke open. Hi, he said, and his voice cracked on the single syllable. Mateo stared at him with those matching gray eyes. Who are you? Dominic looked at Elena, asking permission with his eyes. She took a breath and made a choice. This is Dominic, she said quietly. He's your father. The words hung in the air. Luna woke up fully, looking between her mother and this stranger. Mateo's expression didn't change, but Elena could see his mind working, processing. You're the one who gave us the apartment, Mateo said finally. Yes. And the toys? Yes. Why? Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. Dominic knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his son. Because I made a mistake, a really big one, and I'm trying to fix it. What mistake? I wasn't there when you needed me, when your mom needed me, and I'm sorry for that. Mateo considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. Then he said, Mama says mistakes are okay if you learn from them. Your mama is very smart. I know. Mateo glanced at Elena, then back at Dominic. Are you going to stay now? The question broke something in Dominic's chest. Elena could see it happen, could see the exact moment he realized what he'd missed, what he'd thrown away, what he could never get back. If your mom says it's okay, he managed, I'd like to try. All eyes turned to Elena. She looked at Dominic, at the man who'd rejected her, who'd spent 3 years building an empire while their children grew up in poverty, who was now kneeling on the floor of a safe house in the middle of the night, trying not to cry in front of the son he'd just met. We'll see, she said. Not a yes, not a no, just possibility. It was enough. Marcus showed them to bedrooms upstairs. The children went down quickly, exhausted from the drama. Elena stayed with them until she was sure they were asleep, then went back downstairs where Dominic sat at the kitchen table looking shell-shocked. Thank you, he said when he saw her, for letting me meet them, for not running, for... What happened tonight? Elena interrupted. The truth. Dominic took a breath. Volkov tried to take out one of my warehouses, place where I store legitimate imports, nothing illegal. His men went in armed, planning to destroy it as a message. My security was waiting. 3 of his people are dead. The rest are in the wind. And now? Now there's going to be a war, unless I can find a way to end it first. He met her eyes. I'm giving him everything he wants. The docks, the import routes, all of it. Elena stared. Why? Because keeping that territory means escalating, means more violence, means putting you and the children in the crossfire. His voice was steady, absolute. I'm not willing to do that, not anymore. You're dismantling your empire. Parts of it. The parts that make us targets. He leaned forward. I've spent 20 years building power, and in 2 weeks, I've learned that all that power means nothing if I can't protect the people I love. So I'm choosing differently. Choosing us. Choosing them. You don't owe me anything, Elena. You never did. But those children deserve a father who puts them first. And for the first time in my life, that's exactly what I want to be. Elena sat down across from him. This doesn't fix what you did. What you said. I know. And I'm not sure I'll ever be able to forgive you completely. I know that too. But I'm willing to try. For them. Because they deserve to know their father if he's actually going to be worth knowing. She held his gaze. Don't make me regret this. I won't, I promise. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Dominic said quietly, Can I tell you something? What? When I saw them tonight, really saw them, not just photos or surveillance footage, I understood, for the first time, what you've been protecting, what I almost destroyed before they were even born. His voice was thick. They're perfect, and you made them that way, alone, while I was too much of a coward to even try. You're trying now. Trying to make up for 3 years of mistakes in a few weeks. It's not enough. No, Elena agreed, but it's something, and something is better than nothing. She stood, exhausted beyond measure. I'm going to bed. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what comes next. But tonight, we all just need to sleep. Elena. He stopped her at the doorway. I meant what I said. I love you, still. I know I don't have the right. I know I destroyed that chance, but I need you to know that everything I'm doing isn't just about them. It's about you two. About trying to become someone who deserves a second chance. Elena looked at him for a long moment. At the man who'd broken her. The man who was trying to fix himself. The father of her children who'd finally chosen them over his fear. Then prove it, she said quietly. Not with money or security or grand gestures. Prove it by showing up, by being present, by choosing us every day even when it's hard. I will. I promise. She went upstairs to check on her sleeping children one more time. Matteo had kicked off his blankets. Luna clutched her stuffed rabbit. They looked peaceful, safe. For the first time in 3 years, Elena let herself believe they might actually be. The next morning, she woke to the sound of laughter. Not screaming, not crisis, just pure, delighted childhood laughter. She found Dominic in the kitchen making pancakes while Matteo supervised and Luna sat on the counter directing operations like a tiny chef. The scene was so domestic, so normal that it hurt to look at. The secret is butter, Dominic was saying seriously to Matteo, and you have to flip them at exactly the right time. How do you know when? When the bubbles on top start to pop. See? Like that. He flipped the pancake. Perfect golden brown. Luna clapped. Again! Dominic saw Elena in the doorway and smiled, uncertain, hopeful. Morning, we're making breakfast. Hope that's okay. It's fine. She moved into the kitchen, accepted the coffee he'd already poured for her. You're good at this. At pancakes? At this. Being a dad. I'm faking it entirely. But his eyes were bright, happy in a way she'd never seen. They're incredible. Do you know Luna has opinions about star shapes versus regular circles? Very strong opinions. She gets that from you. The stubbornness? He grinned. Fair. They ate breakfast together. A family. Broken and rebuilt and fragile, but real. Mateo told jokes that weren't funny, but everyone laughed anyway. Luna ate 3 pancakes and declared herself the champion. Dominic looked at Elena across the table, and she could see everything he was feeling written across his face. Love, regret, hope, fear. All the things he'd taught himself not to feel coming back at once. After breakfast, Marcus appeared with news. Volkov accepted the terms. The docks are his. The territory dispute is over. Dominic nodded. Good. What else? Your legitimate businesses are solid. The board of directors for the foundation approved your expansion proposal. You're officially transitioning from criminal empire to actual philanthropist. Marcus grinned. How does it feel to be going straight? Weird. Good weird. Dominic looked at Elena. I'm starting a foundation for families in situations like yours was. Single parents, immigrants, people who need help but fall through the cracks. Housing assistance, medical care, education support. Using your guilt money for good, Elena asked, but there was no bite to it. Using my blood money to help people I should have helped all along, including you. She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the walls that had kept her safe. But looking at him now, at the father playing with his children, at the man trying to build something better from the ruins of what he'd been, she found she didn't want to fight anymore. Okay, she said simply. Okay? Okay, we'll try this. Really try. Not just for the kids. For us too. She held his gaze. But if you screw this up, if you hurt them or me or disappear when things get hard, I won't. I promise. I'll show up every single day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes to prove I've changed. Mateo tugged on Dominic's sleeve. Can we go outside? Luna wants to see the stars even though it's daytime. Stars don't come out during the day, buddy. Luna doesn't care. She wants to look anyway. Dominic laughed and let himself be dragged outside by 2 3-year-olds who'd decided he was worth knowing. Elena watched them through the window. Her children, their father, a family she'd never imagined having. Marcus came to stand beside her. He's going to be okay. You know that, right? He's actually going to pull this off. Maybe. Elena smiled slightly. Or maybe we'll all figure it out together. That works too. Outside, Dominic lifted Luna onto his shoulders so she could see the sky better. Mateo held his hand and pointed at clouds. They looked happy, complete in a way that made Elena's heart ache. She'd spent 3 years running from this man, building a life without him, protecting her children from the damage she thought he'd cause. But maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong. Maybe people could change. Maybe love could survive mistakes. Maybe families could be built from broken pieces and still be whole. She went outside to join them. Dominic saw her coming and held out his free hand. An invitation, a question. Elena took it. His fingers laced through hers and it felt like coming home. Like the 3 years of separation had been necessary, but were finally over. Look, Mama, Luna pointed at the sky. I see a star. That's the sun, baby. It's a day star. Dominic said so. Elena looked at Dominic, who shrugged with a smile. She was very insistent. She gets that from you, Elena said again. I know. I'm learning that's not always a bad thing. They stood together in the yard of a safe house in the middle of nowhere, while their children searched for stars in the daylight sky. And for the first time since Elena had walked out of Dominic's penthouse 3 years ago, she felt something other than fear about the future. She felt hope. Real, solid, terrifying hope. The kind that made you believe in second chances and redemption, and the possibility that broken people could learn to be whole. Thank you, Dominic said quietly, for letting me back in, for giving me a chance to be their father, for not giving up on me even when I'd given up on myself. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard, complicated. We have a lot to work through. I know. And just because we're trying doesn't mean we're together. Not like that. Not yet. I know that too. But someday, Elena said, and her voice was soft with possibility, Maybe. If you keep showing up, if you keep choosing us, maybe someday we could be something real. Dominic turned to her, and his eyes were bright with tears he wasn't bothering to hide anymore. I'd wait forever for that. For you. For this. You won't have to wait forever, just until I'm ready. Then I'll be here. Every day. However long it takes. Mateo ran over and crashed into both of them, wrapping his small arms around their legs. Group hug! Luna scrambled down from Dominic's shoulders and joined the pile. 4 people, tangled together, laughing in the sunlight. A family. Broken and rebuilt and imperfect, but theirs. Elena looked at Dominic over their children's heads and saw her future reflected in his eyes. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and worth fighting for. We're going to be okay, she said. To him, to herself, to the universe that had brought them back together despite everything. Yeah, Dominic agreed, his voice thick with emotion. We really are. And for the first time in 3 years, Elena believed it. The twins she'd protected alone were safe now. The man who'd rejected them had chosen them instead, and the life she'd built from nothing had transformed into something she'd never dared to imagine. Not because someone had saved her, but because she'd been strong enough to accept help, brave enough to give second chances, wise enough to know that family wasn't about perfection. It was about who stayed. And this time, against all odds and despite every mistake, he was staying. They all were. Together.